Commissioner of the Border Management Authority, Dr. Michael Masiapato, has today unveiled the BMA's 2025 festive season operational plan. The plan outlines how the authority will manage the expected surge in cross-border movement over December and January. It details the support from key government structures, law enforcement agencies, and intelligence bodies. Speaking during a media briefing, the Commissioner highlighted the challenges South Africa continues to face at its borders, including illegal migration, sophisticated cross-border crime, and the smuggling of illicit goods. He says the plan draws from historical travel patterns, key lessons from previous operations, and the need to improve capacity, queue management, and security at all 71 ports of entry. Let's speak now to the Commissioner of the Border Management Authority, Dr. Michael Masiapato. Good afternoon to you, Doc, and thank you for joining us. Let's start with what the plan entails. I mean, this is routine, isn't it, for you? It's challenging in that there's a peak and a surge of travel affecting all these points of entry, but in a way, it's routine in that you've got historical data and past patterns to base your planning on.
Yeah, no, thank you very much, Thulasizwe. Let's appreciate this opportunity as the Border Management Authority. Yes, indeed, Thulas, in terms of, I would say, the operational posture, we can describe it in that context, that it is routine. However, one thing that is very much fundamental is the fact that during this particular period, everything gets heightened. The volumes, in terms of the numbers of people that are seeking to exit the country, it becomes very high. But also the people that are intending to conduct or do nefarious acts are also very much active, and they always like taking advantage during this time. So it is for that reason that we have to develop this kind of a plan and be able to make sure that we put all the systems in place so that we can be able to deal with every kind of eventuality. So that is basically the context. But of course, the other issue is we have to bring in additional resources in key ports, but we have to also even increase the operating hours so that we can be able to handle the volumes, as it were, during this period.
So say a bit more then about the key tenets of the plan, the 2025 festive season operational plan. What are they?
Maybe the first tenet, Thulas, is the issue regarding the exit leg, which is supposed to be what you will call, the exit leg, which is traffic management around the issue of the corridors. So that becomes very much fundamental for us to be able to deal with the exit leg, because that is very much critical. Once you lose corridor management, you have chaos ultimately into the port. So that is the first key tenet in as far as the exit leg is concerned. And of course, the second part of the exit leg becomes the ability to manage, the activities within the port itself around the issue of efficiencies, but also ensuring that people don't have to spend too much time inside the port and not necessarily being processed out. And of course, that is in terms of the port itself. But then the second part is basically what we will call the out-of-port environment. Here we talk about the vulnerable segments. There are still people, even during the exit leg, that will try to exit the country outside the port and not necessarily come through the port. That on its own becomes the fundamental issue. But when it comes to the return leg, the main fundamental is dealing with illegal migration when people try to enter the country illegally. And that is where we activate all of these technologies. That becomes very much fundamental for us to be able to identify the individuals trying to enter the country illegally, intercept them, get deported. But of course, for the facilitators, we have to be making sure that those individuals are ultimately, arrested, given to the police, and then we open a case for aiding and abetting. Those are the facets of the plan.
Let me suggest to you, Dr. Masiapato, that all your intentions and plans are only as effective as the areas where you operate the official points of entry. And unless in your cooperation and collaboration with the other players in the value chain, your SANDF responsible for entirety of the border fences, especially at points of vulnerability, your efforts are futile, because you will step up at points of entry to ensure that no one who is not documented, who doesn't have the right papers or is carrying illicit goods is able to cross, but they'll simply go down 2 kilometers down the fence and be able to cross.
Yeah, maybe just to indicate, Tulas, in terms of the border management model, remember, this is an integrated border management model. But in terms of operations, it is an all-inclusive, model, as it were. So in this instance, as you will remember, we had indicated that this plan is actually supported by, the Border Technical Committee. That is the group of 10 directors generals, which includes the Commissioner of Police, the Chief of Defense, the Commissioner of SARS, the DGs of all of these other departments. So in other words, the plan as we unveil it, it is all inclusive. Exactly that. The issue of the vulnerable segments on the borderline, it is something that we do collectively with the members of the SANDF, but also with the members from the SAPS. Yes, we work together, even in the context of the identification of individuals attempting to enter the country illegally. The deployment of the drones that we actually use now in terms of monitoring the borderline, the vulnerable areas, and all of that. The response thereof, we do it as a collective and be able to deal with all of those issues. And maybe let me say this, Tulas, just for context. You will remember that initially, we used to have a lot, particularly during the return leg, where people will be found on the corridor, whether on the N1 or on the N4, in the bus or in taxis where people don't have documents completely at all. It is because of the vulnerabilities that were there and also the absence of the drones. But with the drones that we now have, we are able to monitor those particular areas around the port and ultimately see people attempting to enter in and be able to do the interception. And that is why those incidences had actually gone down.
Yeah. So we have 71 ports of entry, and I don't imagine for a second that they are all equally busy. In fact, you tell us in your figures that 75% of the movement happens at just 10 of these ports. Just talk to me about those 10 ports and where your key focus will be in this season.
Yes, indeed, Tulas, that is exactly the context of our planning. The context of our planning obviously looks into the historical data that is obviously based on the empirical practicalities that we dealt with before. Yes, 75% of the movement happens in the 10 ports. And in this instance, if you talk about the air modality, we talk mainly about OR Tambo, Cape Town International, as well as Kinshasa. And maybe on the issue of what have we done, the top port in this instance, you will be aware OR Tambo is the top one. Because of capacity issues, what we have done, we have spoken to the Gauteng Department of Safety or Community Safety. They actually gave us 80 officials that we have actually trained in the past 2 weeks or so to actually be immigration officers. So those individuals are going to be full-time in this particular period, working in assisting us at the BMA. You will remember, Tulas, as an organization, we operate at 25% capacity. Therefore, we had to strive through partnerships. So in this instance, we have 80 that are going to help us at OR Tambo deal with the queues. In terms of Cape Town International, we spoke to the local government that side. We also spoke to the province. They gave us around 50 officials. We have trained them already. They are on the ground. They're going to be able to assist us on that. So those are the two areas in terms of air modality. The other top ports in terms of land, it will be Beitbridge, Lebombo, Oshuk, and obviously followed through by Groblersdal Bridge. So in those particular ports, because we did not have any additional people per se, what we then had to do is to take people from our head office as well as some officials from other smaller ports and take them into those. So the deployment in those 10 ports at Tulas becomes our key focus, and that is where even our drones are going to be in terms of dealing with illegal migration.
I don't know how decisively you can answer this question, Dr. Masiapato, with your considerations, given your position. But to be operating at 25% of the capacity you need, that's a policy failure, especially in a context where the issue of controlling and regularizing migration is such a hot button issue for a significant portion of the electorate, of the population. Do you see it as a policy failure, a failure to commit? This agency was started a couple of years ago, and years later you're still operating at 25% of capacity. That's atrocious.
Yeah, I think, Tulas, you are very much right by saying that given the fact that I am a public servant myself, I wouldn't talk about a policy failure. But what I can talk about is just the facts. The issue is not necessarily something that we could even describe now as a new thing. It is something that has always been on the table as early as 2023 when we started. You will remember financially at the time, part of the requirement was the structure that has been established for this organization will require 11,200 officials, and at least over the medium term, meaning over 3 years, around 2.9 billion will be required, and that will be able to enable us to go forward. But of course, on that basis, at that particular time, we were able to secure 250 million, which effectively meant that we had to operate mainly by the people we integrated from other government departments, and were not able to bring additional human resources. So out of that, we ended up with around 2,600 as we speak. And that will be the 1,900 we integrated, plus the 400 border guards we brought in. You'll remember with Minister Mutsoaledi at the time, and of course the 400 that we did later. So that is basically where we are. I think government is understanding the criticality of this work, and I suppose there is work in the background to assist the work. But I wouldn't want to categorize it as a policy failure. But I think for me, it was just to put the facts on the table, which are fairly known because we actually talk about them in parliament committees.
Yeah, you're not a diplomat, but that's a smart diplomatic answer there. Dr. Michael Masia Pato, who is the Commissioner of the Border Management Authority. Thank you for your time this afternoon.